in and out of the Beltway. From large cities to small towns to the rural heartland. From sea to shining sea. This is Wayman, Brunson, and Vernuccio. Inside the News.
Welcome back to the program. This is Inside the News with Frank Vernuccio and Ben Brunson. Let's say hi to the guys. How you doing today, Ben?
I'm doing great, surviving summertime in Florida.
Yeah, it can be hot. I lived, 8 or 9 years down there. Frank Vernuccio, how are you?
Well, greetings from New York City. We have the best basketball team and the worst politicians in America.
All right, and we don't always talk about sports, but we're going to talk about it in segment 1 and then segment 3. Segment 3 is going to be quite interesting there, but sports can unify, and it's quite interesting. We live in a divided world today, and everybody's left and right and whatever, but the New York Knicks, they won the NBA championship, and it is amazing. Black, white, red, or blue, it doesn't matter what color you are in New York City. Everybody has come together. Frank.
Well, of course, in praise of our program, the streets of New York, people were chanting Brunson, MVP. Of course, I must assume it's part of Ben Brunson's role on our show.
Well played, Frank. Well played. Ben, what do you say about that?
Well, I humbly accept the award. So I think Jalen Brunson might have a word to say about that, but among us, I'll take that role.
All right, but Frank, let's turn it though. But the divisions in this country are wider than what people truly want to admit. Because if you're in one part of the country, you might not see it. Another part of the country, it's right in your face.
Well, that's true, but it's amazing that you can go to a ballpark. You can be sitting next to a conservative, next to a liberal, and if you're both on the same side for the same team, all that goes away and you're all rooting for the same thing. Too bad that spirit wasn't wider spread where people would root for the good of America and the good of our Constitution rather than always trying to attack it, rather than seeing our own Constitution, as the left does, as the enemy.
15 years ago, Ben, on 9/11, people were united. I mean, George Bush went on that pile of rubble in New York City, and and every congressperson, they got on the steps of the Capitol. They were all united and together. That was short-lived, wasn't it?
It was, but let's talk about sports. I was pretty sure you were going to go in a different direction.
Okay.
Frankly, I wouldn't view NBA as a unifying sport. I would view the World Cup taking place in North America right now as a globally unifying sporting event, which dwarfs anything that the NBA can put together. You're talking about billions of people around the world tuning in to every one of these games that are now being played on U.S. soil. Some games are in Mexico City and Monterrey. Some games are up in Canada and Toronto. But the World Cup is a massive sporting event. It just dwarfs anything that you can think of in the U.S., maybe with the exception of the Super Bowl. And it really is amazing to watch. Earlier this week, Iran played New Zealand. That game took place in Los Angeles, and it was kind of surreal because the Los Angeles stadium was full of Iranian supporters. There was a huge Iranian crowd there. And one of the things you find out is that the largest Iranian expat community in the world lives in Los Angeles, and they turn out in droves. If you watch Uruguay play in Florida, it was a massive home game for Uruguay. There are huge crowds watching these events. The whole world tunes in, and I think the World Cup brings the world closer together than anything else you could name happening anywhere in the world.
Okay, Frank, up there, though, there is starting to be some pushback with immigration, isn't there? We're starting to see the DHS and kind of explain.
Yeah, they are. Of course, states like New York and California, the blue states, essentially continue to defy the federal supremacy clause by claiming that they're not going to cooperate with federal authorities. But I want to bring up a part of this that's not spoken about enough. According to the latest reports, there are 250,000 unaccompanied minors who came into the United States and were totally lost in the system. Many are now in various forms of slavery, sexual servitude, and so forth. The disaster that Joe Biden unleashed upon the United States and upon unaccompanied minors, particularly from Latin America, is one of the worst human disasters in history. And you barely see about it in the papers at all. It is an untold human disaster. We should be paying a lot more attention to this.
And the czar, the border czar of the United States, Kamala Harris, and she was basically to oversee and make sure that they came in okay, not to stop them from coming in, Ben.
Yeah, and not to mention the role of Javier Becerra, who will probably be the next governor of California. But you can go on and on about the scandals of the prior administration, but probably the worst and ugliest episode in our recent country's history was the child trafficking that was green-lighted, aided, and abetted by the federal government under the Biden administration, where they did everything possible to essentially roll out the welcome wagon to child traffickers. And as Frank said, we're talking about hundreds of thousands of children who were bought into this company and basically turned over to gangs that force them into prostitution primarily. It is a horrible blot on our country. These kids are out there right now suffering because of what the prior administration allowed to happen. Thankfully, the current administration is focused on this as they can be. They have shut the door on more kids being brought into this country for sex trafficking, and they are working to try to hunt down and liberate these children. It's the worst thing you can possibly imagine. That's one thing that almost makes me ashamed to be an American. The fact that this child trafficking and the child pornography that results from it happened under the Biden administration, pretty much with the full acquiescence of the federal government. And it is a stain that's probably the worst on this country's history since slavery.
You know, when you mention child trafficking, it's not just kids under 18. We're talking, take half of that age. We're talking like 10 and 9. And that's where it's really starting to be even more disgusting when you dig into it.
Primarily prepubescent children we're talking about here. And that's what is disgusting and horrifying. Unfortunately, this country has become a hotbed, not just of pornography. And adult pornography is one thing, at least they're consenting adults, but we're talking about child pornography produced in this country to a very large extent using the children that were brought in under the prior administration. It is, God help us, because it's one of those things where you think God's vengeance on this country will be severe for allowing that to happen.
You know, I'm in the middle of the country in the state of Missouri, and you would not think that it's happening here. It does happen here. And there's a pipeline that comes right up from Texas to Oklahoma, Arkansas, right into here. It goes right into the middle of the country. But Frank, you're dealing with it, and they even come in from the north border. We're talking Canada.
No, that's exactly right. The numbers are astounding. The pipeline is so fluid and so viable. Look, we had 4 years of unfettered illegal immigration into the United States, not checking for parentage, not checking for diseases, not checking for criminal records. The criminal record indeed belongs to the Biden administration. You know, this can't be emphasized enough. We talk about all sorts of political give and take, political prosecutions and so forth. This is a clear case of extraordinary harm done to 250,000 children intentionally by an administration that looked the other way while this was happening. It is not too much of an exaggeration to say that a key component of the child exploitation ring of human trafficking was the Biden administration. And you can't emphasize that enough.
And parents, you're listening right now, parents and grandparents, Don't be afraid to tell your younger kids about this. Sit down with them in a reasonable way and explain what it is about. And if someone's going to grab you, kick and scream, claw, take, skin out or whatever you have to do. And Ben, you know what I'm saying? We need to educate these younger kids to defend themselves.
Yeah, unfortunately, that's a reality. Look, it's always been a reality. When I was a young kid in elementary school, they showed us films about you know the dangers of being abducted off the street by an adult who drives by in a car and offers you candy or something like that. Those are unfortunately realities that children have to be aware of. So yes, knowledge is critical, and it's we spend a lot of time in this country talking about the scams that target elderly in this country, and we need to rightly do that. A lot of those are online scams that are a huge industry, unfortunately, but the most vulnerable are our children. And you have to educate your children about the dangers of the real world, and don't scare them to death, but some knowledge goes a long way.
All right.
Fraud. The problem, though, is that it's not just the stranger danger issue. That is comparatively minor compared to the 250,000 that were let into the country by the Biden administration, who went directly into sexual servitude.
Okay, Frank, let's stick with you. The arrests are starting to mount up with the frauds. J.D. Vance was put in charge of this, and we saw all the fraud that was going on in Minnesota. But Minnesota is one state. Ohio is another state. And as you start to go on down the list, the fraud of the billions of dollars is greater than what we thought.
That's right. And look at New York and California, where I think two of the biggest fraud cases will come up. Part of the problem is that both of those cases, particularly New York and particularly, more importantly, California with its situation, the state government and local governments actively work to impede federal investigations. Indeed, the California state legislature at Sacramento has actually passed legislation ordering state agencies not to cooperate with federal researchers. That is absolutely astounding. Now, the political battles that are going to occur from this are going to be incredible. You can imagine a federal investigator trying to research records in California. The state agency absolutely objects to it, will not allow the federal investigator into their records. What happens at that point? Does the federal investigator then show up with federal marshals? Does the state government then have state troopers saying, no, you can't? You now have a situation where you have state troopers getting into almost a direct conflict with federal marshals. Now, this isn't a new nightmare. If you recall, during the Biden administration, there was a possibility that Texas Rangers would have wound up in conflict with federal law enforcement agencies on the border. The Texas Rangers trying to enforce Border Patrol, the federal government under the Biden administration saying, no, you can't do that. We're really looking at a tinderbox situation.
Ben?
Look, a couple of things on this point. Number one, the numbers are much bigger than anyone fears at this point. Yeah. We're talking about hundreds of billions of dollars a year that have been stolen from federal and state taxpayers, and primarily in schemes that are aided and abetted and led by the ruling class. That's the reality. And the prosecutions, you probably would employ most of the attorneys in this country if you're going to prosecute everybody that needs to be prosecuted here. The key prosecutions that must occur are the people who have been completely above the law, the political leaders. And I'm talking about governors, states attorneys general in the state of Minnesota. I'm talking about political leaders like Hillary Clinton, who have absolutely led this grift that's taken place. It started 30 years ago in Washington. It's only grown since. And until you hold accountable the people who have led this theft of money, taxpayers' money, the looting of our taxpayer coffers, until they go to prison, this will continue, because if only low-level people get hit, this is just like the mafia. You didn't really stop the mafia till you went after the mafia dons, and you're going to have to go after people that is going to be very politically uncomfortable to go after, but it has to be done.
There's a couple key people that keep coming up. Hillary Clinton, her name keeps coming up because it's true, because of what is going on. Barack Obama. These names keep coming up, Frank.
Well, that's exactly right. And the Barack Obama one is perhaps the most difficult of all. It appears now from all the evidence that's so far been established that Barack Obama was intimately involved in conspiracies to prevent Trump from winning in his first election. Going after a former president in that sense, not so much for his policies, obviously, but for direct conspiracies, is going to be really uncomfortable, really harsh, but it's got to be done at some point.
The people of America will not like what they see. There are half of them that want to see the perp walk, and the other one are going to say, how dare you do that to the chosen one, the guy who was supposed to be the Messiah, the first black president, outside of Bill Clinton, of course, for the United States of America. We've got a whole lot more yet to come here. The Iran-United States deal. Is it true? We haven't seen a thing of the MOU, and that is so important. We're going to talk about the MOU coming right up. This is Wayman, Brunson, and Venuccio. Stay with us. We'll be right back.
You're listening to Wayman, Brunson, and Venuccio, Inside the News.